Let me ask you something straight. How many times in the last week have you opened Claude or ChatGPT and basically explained yourself all over again? Hey Claude, I need you to write in this tone. Hey, don't sound AI generated. Hey, use this format. Follow these rules. These are my brand colors, so on and so forth. And then tomorrow again, you do the same thing all over again from scratch. It's like you've hired a brilliant employee. The employee really knows what to do, how to do, when to do, but you have to essentially train them every day. They've got amnesia. They just cannot remember your instructions. This is where Claude Skills comes in. What if I told you that you have to train Claude once, just once, and it will remember exactly how you want things done every single time, right? Automatically, no copy pasting, no re-explaining, no attaching PDFs, nothing. Yes, that is exactly what Claude Skills are, and by the end of this video, you will have built and deployed your first ever Claude skill. So before even we build anything, you actually need to understand where skills fit inside Claude, because a lot of people actually end up confusing skills and projects. They're totally different things, so let me break it down for you. Projects are your knowledge base. You upload a brand guideline, a product spec, a research doc, something like that, and then Claude uses it as a reference. It's a library. You're essentially saying, hey Claude, this is what you need to know. Skills, on the other side, is an instruction manual. You are saying, here is exactly how you have to perform this particular task, step by step. It's not a manual or it's not a guidance. It's actually the procedure involved in doing a particular task. It's the difference between giving someone a cookbook with thousands of recipes versus giving them one particular recipe very, very well, very, very easily broken down into step by step. Giving the exact measurement, the timing, the plating, and all of that. Right? As you can see on your screen, there are three components. Projects is of course your library. Skill trains your Claude into an skilled employee, and MCP is of course the nervous system, right? MCP stands for Modern Context Protocol, which is the connection layer. What it does is basically plugs Claude into live data, your Google Calendar, your email, your inbox, databases, etc. And then skills tell Claude what to do with this data. So the mental model that you should have is that projects are the brain, skills is the training, and MCP is the nervous system, right? That's how you need to think about it. And that's how each of them play a great role amongst each other. But skills becomes a really, really important part, because without training, anything that comes from the nervous system reaches the brain has no meaning, because the outcome is going to become very generic and you're going to end up with AI slop, right? So let's deep dive into Claude skills and understand what these skills really are. Now, before we go into building your first skill, you need to do a test, because you'll always not need skills, right? I essentially call it the 3x rule, which is if I have typed the same instructions more than 3 times, separate occasions on Claude, this means I need a skill, right? The skill is begging to be built if there are 3 separate instances where I have typed the same thing again and again. Right? Don't think about complexity. Just plain repetition is the signal that you need to build a skill. Right? I'll give you an example. Right? Every time I create a presentation for Ayuda, it needs to have specific colors, fonts, the logo placed correctly, a particular slide layout. I used to explain it to Claude every single time. Now, one skill handles it all. It fires automatically. Every document, every deck, every PDF, it fires it automatically. And here I am to be able to generate it within seconds. Every YouTube video we produce has the same pipeline, right? It goes ahead and understands what I want to say. I give it my entire thoughts, and then it generates an Ayuda branded and Ayuda simplified document and gives me what I need to cover in the video. It makes my life, and it can really make your life, extremely simple just when you understand how to use Claude skills, right? Otherwise, you're just using it manually, and something that has a potential of going 10x, you're curtailing yourself at 2 or 3x, right? A very quick formula. If you describe your task as, every time X happens, do Y in a Z format, that's essentially a skill. And if you're required to do it multiple times, you're better off making a Claude skill here. Right? So now I want you to mentally list down 3 things that you feel you've repeated on Claude. It could be, your diet plan. It could be your work presentations. It could be, your persona, maybe your social media posts, anything. But think about three things that you have been repeating on Claude or ChatGPT every single time you use them. And that is where your first skill is hiding. All right, let's build. I'm going to show you my screen so that you understand how terribly simple it is to actually build a skill. Here is a Claude skill, as you can see. Now look at it. It's essentially a very similar structure to a folder. It's inside customize in your settings. So once you go onto your settings here, you can just go to settings, then go to connectors, then go to customize, and here you are, right? And you see your Claude skill right here. Now, each skill is essentially a markdown file, right? So if you see, there is something called as Ayuda brand, and there is a file called skill.md, right? What does MD stand for? MD stands for markdown. Markdown is just a good way of writing a text so that, all the AI tools and basically formatted tools realize it. And this is what your skill is, right? Now, of course, the folder that you put has to be in kebab case, which means that it has to be lower cases, and the word should be separated by hyphens. So it's Ayuda hyphen brand, Ayuda hyphen hackathons, and so on and so forth. And it also creates, a lot of examples as well. So there are some examples that Claude gives you automatically so that you have an understanding of how these skills work, right? Now the file inside this skill.md is basically a case sensitive drill down of whatever it is going, right? Now remember, it's written in caps, which is capital skill.md. So if you have this skill.md file somewhere else and you name it in small letters, it will not work. Exactly, it has to be named as skill.md, as you can see here, right? Otherwise, Claude is not going to find it, right? Of course, optionally, you can have more folders. So here there is an assets folder that I have. What does this assets have? Assets have logos for Ayuda in dark and light background. So that whenever there is a dark background, I can use this logo. Whenever there is a light background, I can use this logo. I can add documents. I can add further PDFs, Word files, etc. as well in this assets folder, basically for this Claude skill to remember it, right? All you have to do is you have to just drop this file into this. You just have to click plus here. You can either create a skill with Claude, which means that you can tell Claude that, hey, I want to make a particular skill, which we will do in this video, or you could write an instruction, or you could upload it from your folder, right? Anything works. So that's it. You just drag and drop your skills folder into Claude. You ask Claude to make a skill, and pretty much simple. For me, the best I like is I actually just ask Claude that, hey, here is my use case, here are the requirements, can you make a great skill out of it? And usually Claude does an absolutely amazing job on it. Right, now before we ask Claude to make a skill for us, let me show you what happens inside a skill file. Right? At the very top, you see something called as a YAML header. Right? It basically is right at the top, and two fields matter a lot at the beginning here. First is, of course, the name. Now here, of course, the name is Ayuda Brand Editing and Styling Guide. And the second is the description, right? Now understand that description is the single most important thing that you would do in your skill making, because most people, they just put a generic description, and that's where the skill just never gets fired. It gets ignored, right? And the second is that Claude is actually very conservative about activating a skill. It does not activate the skill on its own every single time. It relies heavily on your description so that it can figure out whether the skill must be pushed or not, right? Which is why you need to ensure that you are a little pushy. Now see how pushy this is in terms of this. I've actually mentioned you need to use this skill every single time you're creating any document, React artifact, and so on and so forth. Even when I explicitly don't mention branding, I've written all the kinds of files that it requires to look at, and all possible files, right? PowerPoint, Word, PDF, assignment sheets, one-pagers, everything, right? You're about to create a file that will be seen by anyone. So I'm giving that, pushiness that, hey, you have to do this really well, and so on and so forth, right? The second thing is, of course, the fact that you have to write it in third person, right? Which means that you cannot write this as, telling Claude, right? You have to actually write this description as what they are about to do, right? So you are about to create a file that will be seen by everyone, and so on and so forth, right? And then, you have to list down some trigger phrases as well. We'll see that at the bottom as well, in terms of, what is the trigger phase, or what are the times in terms of how you go, right? And also create a checklist for it, right? So if you look at, how detailed this skill is, what it has is, it has got, of course, my logo files, it has got all the colors that I'm going to use, it's got all the typography, it's got the document structures as well. So how am I going to create the cover page, how am I going to create the section dividers, and so on and so forth. And it's got some formatting specific notes as well, right? It's got great notes on, how to exactly format certain fonts, how to exactly format certain PPTs, and so on and so forth. So it's created it for slides, for docs, for HTML artifacts, for everything. So that is the third thing, which is you have to anticipate where all your skill will be required, and then give Claude specific instructions for that, right? And of course, I've also written some of the do's and don'ts here. So that is also very important, which means that the third thing that you have to do while you're writing a skill is give it reminders for the tone, right? And also give it a QA checklist. So the reminders for the tone is that every document with my branding has to go with, has to be very direct, has to be very warm, has to be practical, no fluff, confident but not really arrogant, as you can see on the screen. And then of course there is a checklist, right, which is where I'm asking Claude to double verify that the logo is present, double verify that the primary color is there. Because let's face it, what happens is sometimes while going through this entire skill guide, Claude might miss something. So Claude might miss this line, right? It might not be able to see that, okay, this is the code that I want to optimize for, and that is why that color might not come. But then once it ends and it goes ahead and says that, hey, there is a checklist for me, and can I verify whether this particular code is right, it will come to a conclusion that, hey, no, this code is not right, and it's going to fix it, right? So that is how you need to create a skill, and that is how you need to understand how does skill creation work. Now, the moment you've created the skill, you just actually go and trigger it. I'll just show you exactly how, right? I'll just create a new chat here, and I'm just going to tell this to create a document for me, right? Create a demo document for interview prep on Ayuda. That's it. So that's all I'm going to say. I'm just going to change the model and that's it. So now Claude is going to realize that it requires the relevant skills. So the first thing Claude does here, as you can see, is it's going to read the relevant skill files to ensure the proper branding and document creation. So I've not really told Claude rather, that, hey, use this particular skill or all of that. It's figured out that this is a document for Ayuda. I need to use my branding skill. And now when it's going to build the particular document, it's going to come out beautifully with that branded. So that is the power of the skill. And of course, you can create these skills directly as well, right? I can just go and say, hey, could you create a skill for me which gets invoked to act as a nutritionist for me? You can ensure that I am someone who is from India in Bangalore, and you can ensure all the Indian foods that we eat, and it should be able to create a very strong meal plan and nutrition and so on and so forth, right? Just to give you an example of the kind of things that are there. So what happens is now Claude is actually going to create a skill file which is going to be happening. So it's going to create, it's automatically reading the skill creator skill, because there is a skill to create skills within Claude as well. So you understand how smart Claude is, especially once you start understanding the skills, right? We'll just go back and see the interview prep doc as well. So that doc is getting generated, and okay, it's working out with some errors. Yeah, okay, perfect. That doc is getting generated, and the other place, the skill is also getting generated, right? Now, this is exactly how you do it. Now, based on whatever we've discussed earlier in this video, you have to ensure that your skill gets improved from there, right? Right, as you can see, the document is loading here. It's created, and there you go, right? It's created beautifully. I just did not need to tell it anything about the fact that this particular color, this particular skill, this particular logo, anything. It's got it super well. It's got the main logo, the header, It's put a nice logo at the head. It's got the correct colors in the headers and everything is great, right? Of course, this is the demo document, but you get the gist from there, right? To see the second thing that we did, we got to create a skill. So this is also happening. So here, as you can see, what Claude is doing is it's creating the main skill.md file, right? Now, this is the file that Claude is going to use to make it a skill. Now, every single time you're going to ask Claude about food, you're going to ask Claude about nutrition, it will just very, very simply invoke this skill, and that is all, right? That's the beauty of how well you can actually leverage skills, and then all you have to do is just say, and that's it, right? Claude figures out this particular thing requires this particular skill, and you're done. All right, our skill is ready on Claude. Let's see what Claude has done. So here is what it has done. It's created the skill.md. It gives a button here. I've already copied it, but it gives a button to copy into my skills. So I've already done that. But here is the MD file that it's created. It's created a great description, sorry. It's then created, a name, the core identity, and all the things that you need. It's also added a lot of references. So it's created a food database of all the things that an Indian particularly eats. Now, I didn't give it this database. Claude is smart enough to say that a skill is great when it has actual data. So what it has done is that it's created a great one. So there are breakfast items, all the different kind of breakfast items that are available or usually eaten in India. There are rice dishes, there are dals, there are rotis, sabzis, everything is here. So now this is like a full blown skill from there, right? And all I have to do now is I have to just say to Claude, hey Claude, I am looking for nutritious food. What should I eat today? That's all you have to do, right? Now, instead of giving a generic answer, Claude is going to read into this very particular skill. So that's what, let me check my nutrition skill. So it's going to read this Indian nutritionist skill, use all the references that you've given it to actually generate a very strong recommendation for you. Much, much better than, just using Claude or every single time telling Claude this, right? Now, this skill actually is trained to ask questions. So as you can see on your screen, it's giving me what are the goals. So I'll just say, I'm going to cook at home and non-vegetarian and weight loss. I'm going to just say that, right? And then this is going to run its thing, and then it's going to give me that, right? So it's already created like a full day plan based on whatever was given already to me on that Claude skill. And now I don't ever need to tell Claude about anything else. All I need to say to Claude is, what should I eat today? It's going to dive into the skill, figure out what all has happened, and then give me the best recommendation possible. Now that you've seen how skills work, let's try and understand the depths of it, right? There are two things that work really well for skills. Of course, description and the header is something that we've already talked about. What we're going to talk about is what makes the instructions work and give you some exact steps and examples, right? Now, the best way to write an instruction, and if Claude is writing an instruction, you can give it feedback to improve it based on that, is you write two things. One is steps and the other is examples. So steps are what? They are numbered imperative commands. So read the uploaded file, identify the header row, remove the empty rows so that your output comes clean, with a summary of changes, right? Every single step defined with one action, very clear, really no room for any interpretation, right? And this is actually the number one reason why good skills fail, because while the description is good, the vague instructions actually, pull it down, right? If you just say, for example, the brand guideline should format it nicely, doesn't mean anything, right? Claude doesn't know what nice is. Claude knows this should be the margin, this should be the spacing, this should be the header, this should be the footer, and so on and so forth. Again, going deeper into it, like, hey, this is a text that you should put as heading 2. This is the text that you should put with font size 18, so on and so forth, right? That's what makes skills work. Anything in AI in general works better when you give it specific examples and specific instructions. The second thing, as you saw on the Claude skill that we were just doing, is references, right? The more references you give, the better your outcome becomes, because there, if, for example, the reference of all Indian dishes was not there, Claude would have needed to, search that and then more chances of hallucination, more chances of finding something random, and maybe suggesting you granola bowl or something that's not really available in India as much. But there now Claude has a reference of all the dishes that are readily made in India, and that makes the skill really, really better. Right? So step based and then examples. Those are two things that are absolutely required in your skill. And one more final thing, your entire skill should not be more than 500 lines, right? 500 lines is too much for Claude to consume, especially if you're using the Sonnet models. If you're using the Opus models, you can be a little more, but if you're using Sonnet models, 500 lines is very, very good for creating a particular skill. Now, a quick but an important concept, references, right? I already talked about it. If your skill requires, to put a massive brand guideline and a really long template, don't paste the entire thing in skill.md. You can save it as a separate file in references in the folder, just like we saw a little bit earlier in this video, right? So in your instructions, talk about how that reference and that voice guide and that brand guide and so on and so forth can be referenced, or how that food list can be referenced, and that will make the skill better. One small thing that you have to be careful about in the reference is don't have one reference file link with another reference file. So your reference file should be individually sufficient to help the skill, right? Just one level deep. Don't say that, okay, the skill is going to ask reference 1 is going to ask reference 2. That is where an AI model starts breaking completely, right? What happens is actually Claude starts reading through your skill, right? And there is a finite set of lines that Claude can read in one go. So what ends up happening is that Claude just stops halfway and then misses any critical piece of information that is needed, right? It's like a corporate email chain that all of us have been part of. There are 25 emails on it, and you're bound to miss 2 of them, 3 of them, 4 of them, based on how attentive you are. And it's the same with Claude as well, right? So simple rule, 500 lines of the skill, then it should have only one level deep, which is the reference should be sufficient to support Claude. If there is another reference, it should be completely independent. It should not be linked to the first reference. Now that you've understood skills, let me talk about something that not a lot of people really talk about when they teach skills or when they talk about it. Let's assume you asked Claude to draft an email, and what happens is your content skill gets fired, right? And you are confused and you just can't do anything because Claude's eating away your credits for the day. Now what you want to do is you want to get some code cleaned up, and your code review skill gets activated, right? And two skills both start thinking that they should be the ones that should handle your request. Now, why does this happen? This happens because whenever you give a particular instruction to Claude, it scans all your skills and goes through their descriptions and picks the one that has the highest score. So if your skills have overlapping descriptions and overlapping triggers, they can actually fight against each other and leave you, doing the rework again and again and essentially frustrated. There are 3 easy ways to fix it. 1, non-overlapping territories. Now every skill should have a distinct domain. Email drafter does emails, brand enforcer does brand compliance. There is no mix and match, no generic ones as such. 2, you set up very aggressive negative boundaries, right? So your email drafter should be told that do not use brand voice or do not use brand checks while drafting the email. Your brand enforcer skill should actually say, do not get involved when an email is written or when an email is being drafted unless explicitly told so. So that's really helpful from there. And 3, you should have a distinctive trigger language, right? So if both skills actually help respond to, hey, help me write XYZ, you actually have a problem, right? So each skill needs a unique trigger, and it needs unique trigger phrases. And that's how you need to look at it. A very simple example is our brand skill at Ayuda and our YouTube skill used to clash all the time because they both involve content creation. So what we did, we fixed it. We told the brand skill to do not talk about YouTube or do not talk about LinkedIn, etc. We used the YouTube skill and told it to don't get involved in general branding and general stuff. And that essentially fixed it. So very important concept that you need to be aware of, that you need to be very, very sure about the fact that the skills don't start fighting each other. Otherwise, you will end up getting frustrated and work that you're doing will essentially increase. Now let me talk about failure, right? We've talked about what skills are and certain points of failures and so on and so forth. But here what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to summarize the 5 most common reasons why a skill actually breaks. Every failure is, one of these 5 categories. So let's dive in. Number 1 is the silent skill. Now this is a skill that just never gets fired, right? You type a request that should activate this skill, but it just does not get fired. Claude just ignores it, right? Of course, the reason is that your description is weak. The fix is add more triggers and be a more aggressive description where you tell them to use it every single time, tell them to use it even without explicitly mentioning it, and so on. The second failure is the hijacker. What happens is this skill gets fired on requests that it shouldn't be fired on, right? Because the description may be too generic, the description may be too broad. The fix, like I discussed, is add some more negative boundaries, tell it exactly when to not activate, and it's going to work out from there. 3 is the drifter. Now this fires correctly, but the output is very wrong, right? For example, it fires whenever the brand guideline is needed, but the outcome comes muddled, fuzzy, the logo is all everywhere, and so on and so forth, right? So you give it something messy and it keeps it messy essentially, right? So of course the cause is that edge case handling is not there, and usually the checklist that I showed you at the bottom is not there. So add a QA checklist at the end of your skill so that this problem gets solved. Number 4 is the fragile skill, which is basically works perfectly when the input is very good and very clean, but completely collapses whenever the input breaks up. So you give it something messy and it just completely breaks down and doesn't really do anything. The cause again is not enough edge case handling. So that is what you need to give in the skill instructions. You need to explicitly either tell Claude or write it yourself and talk about the skill handling that are there, or use case handling that he should be doing. The last breaking point for a skill is the overachiever skill. Now this basically produces what you did not ask for, right? So it does the branding guidelines, but adds like a bunch of stuff that you didn't really want, adds like few more colors that you didn't really want. Sometimes we'll add like an extra paragraph, extra commentary, some suggestions that you don't want, and so on and so forth. There, the cause is of course that you haven't added enough scope constraints. So the fix is to tell explicitly Claude what not to do in this skill and what is the scope for this particular skill. Right? So note these down, and whenever a skill misbehaves next time, you're going to use that. Now, a good part is that there are a lot of public skill libraries that are available, which you can simply use to import to your Claude. I'll show that to you in the next slide. Now I'm going to take you through a Claude Skills marketplace, which is where someone from the community actually collated over 2,300 different skills and put them in one place for you to see. You can see it on your screen. You can basically look at different kind of skills. So there is a skill for OpenClaw. There are different categories. So I'll just go inside tools, and here is all the skills that I can see from there. I can just see recently updated ones. So there are a lot of skills for querying on Google. There are a lot of skills for analyzing metadata. There are a lot of skills of implementing a feature in a roadmap. So a great way to learn what is possible with skills is to go on skillsmp.com and see what all skills the community is making and just import them into your Claude, right? So here, if I just search, for example, LinkedIn, there you go. So I have a skill that allows to post or schedule content on LinkedIn using a particular API. Now, this is a great skill. The moment Claude learns it, now all you have to do is you have to say, Claude, hey, could you schedule a post for me on LinkedIn with this content? And you just don't even have to worry about it. Claude is going to set up the APIs and everything, and all you have to do is just wait and watch. Or if you just have to say, post for me on LinkedIn, and Claude knows what post it did yesterday, Claude can actually generate a post for you. Then go ahead and use this skill to post it on your LinkedIn, and you're just sitting and chilling on a beach, right? So that is the power of skills, and that is the power of Claude or any of the AI tools at this point. Now, here is what most people do, right? They build a skill. They would probably see this video, see, this is a good skill, use it once or twice, and then just move on. Don't be that person. You're not making the best use of your skill if you're that person. Now, here's what most people do, right? They learn skills and then they just make a skill, use it a couple of times, and goodbye. Don't be that person. Optimize your skills, keep improving them. What Claude has done is it has actually created legitimately great tools for improving your skills. It has got inbuilt evals, it's got inbuilt benchmarking, A/B comparison, description optimizer, and so on and so forth. We'll talk about these in a different video, but always remember you have to keep using Claude to optimize the skills and not just create one and be happy with the outcome. Keep finding problems whenever you execute that skill and repurposing it or re-updating the skills based on the problems that you see. Right, now before we close, just a quick topic for advanced skill users. If you've already been using skills, sometimes your skills actually require computation, which is they require to parse files, calculate numbers from an Excel, transform data into another form, and so on. It's not really a language task like most skills are. Claude's strengths are, judgment, language, reasoning, etc. For math and data crunching, you will require code. Claude will not be able to do it on its own, which is why you can add something called as a scripts folder to your skills. Just like there was a references folder, a scripts folder, what does it have? It has actually Python scripts of doing particular math. So your skill MD says that, hey, whenever you require to calculate something from the Excel file that you have, reference to this script folder inside the skill, which is going to have all the Python code to read through a particular document and do the calculation on top of it, right? Think of it as a very clean script split. Instructions are going to handle the judgment and reasoning and language from Claude, and rewriting in the brand voice, putting the logo and all of that. Scripts are going to handle computation, right? So running, calculate the average of a particular data set, calculate the median of a particular data set, and so on and so forth. And then you can combine both these to actually go ahead, process a CSV with a script and use that script to actually get some great outcome. The great news is Claude has inbuilt scripts, so it can parse CSVs inbuilt, it can run data on it on top of it. So you don't really need to worry about too much unless you're doing some complex calculations. If you're doing some complex calculations, then yes, you would have to add some Python scripts to it. This is only for advanced skill users. 95% of the time, you're not going to require a code snippet to actually run a skill because the use case is going to be handled within Claude very, very well. Now, finally, before we wrap up this video, one last concept that you need to know about skills. When you keep using skills over a long period of time, let's say you're writing a book for over a long period of time, you're building an app from Claude Code, you're running, a multi-week exercise and so on and so forth. Claude's context window actually finishes and it starts forgetting what had happened yesterday or what had happened earlier. The fix is very simple. You basically add one instruction to your skill.md file. What is that? That instruction is at the start of every session, read the context log to see what got completed last time. And at the end of every session, write a summary of whatever happened in this session to my skill instruction or to my change log, so that the next time it runs, it can be available, right? A very elegant fix. Basically, every time your skill runs, it picks up a summary from that run and pushes it into that file, so that every next time when it runs, there is always some data or there is always context that it can use there. So very simple, very easy fix to ensure that your Claude is never going to forget what had happened the last time. Right? It's basically called the shift handover system, and you need to use it for every AI tool, right? Because GPT, Claude, at some point with heavy usage, it's going to run out of context. So it's going to run out of memory to store all your older chats, which is why skills makes it very easy, where the moment a task is finished, you take summary of that task and ask Claude to take the summary of that task, put it into a file that has all the chat sessions that you've done, and that is where Claude keeps reading from, and that makes it very, very easy to use Claude without any breakage of context. Great. I hope this video was helpful. Now I'll just leave you with a solid action plan to implement today, so that you don't just see this video and think about doing it later and then never do it. Step 1, list 3 tasks that you repeat the most on ChatGPT or Claude. You already know this. Just think deep enough, you'll get it immediately. Pick the most frequent one, not the most complex, just the one that you keep using every single time. Most likely it's going to be the brand guideline of your company's work. So just pick that. Step 3, write this down specifically, right? What does this task do? When should it trigger? What does a good output look like? Be very, very specific. The best way to be specific is just to ask Claude to be specific. When I say be specific, I don't mean you spend a lot of time being specific, but what I mean is you make it a point to tell Claude that you need to be specific in every single line that you say here, right? Finally, create the folder, ask Claude to create the folder, or you can create it yourself. Put a great description, put the entire instructions, and that's it. Your skill is done. It's added to your directory. And now you can try it out with different inputs, right? See where it's working, where it's breaking. If it needs an update, do that update. Test it 5 to 7 different times. Because you've been using this particular use case multiple times, it's going to be very evident when it's working out and when it's not, right? You can actually use Claude to build your first skill, but to be honest, my first skill was completely written by me because it really helps me understand where it was breaking. But at this point, you can take that call to say that, okay, I'll just let Claude do the skill building and I am just going to take a step back and see it in action and just enjoy it. But I do always suggest, if you have the time, do your first skill on your own so that you know what works, what doesn't. And then the next time, of course, you keep using Claude and you give it prompts so that it can keep improving. Now, before I finish, if you found this useful, this is the kind of stuff we learn at Ayuda. Our flagship programs often offer all the AI workflows for PMs, your strategy, your growth, your basically entire PM career, right? The practical stuff that actually makes you transition into a product role and not get stuck wherever you are right now. We do one-on-one coaching, live sessions, tool workshops, hackathon, and whatnot. The kind that you just saw today, right? The most practical advice, the most practical learning that you can ever have. If you are interested, the form to apply would be in the comments. You can also check out our website. And if you've made this far, do me a small favor, drop me a comment and tell me what is the task that you're using skills to optimize for. Is there any task that you've picked already and would love to see your skill.md files? So do comment and let me know, and I will see you in the next video. Thank you so much for watching.